And welcome to another episode of Free Kick, and we are very, very excited to be bringing you all of our information and analysis from the pre-season practice games. Yes, a very, very exciting weekend. All of the very informative fantasy news coming out of those games as well, and we have a full complement of hosts here today. How are you all going? I'm going to start specifically with Liam.
Thank you specifically, Willow. I'm specifically going great, and I know can't hang around too much on these intros. We have so much to get to.
Very much the case. So we're going to go to Mel next. Mel, how are you?
I'm good. It was a good weekend of watching games. And yeah, this is always such a long episode. So you're going to have to be super diligent to keep us on time to talk about the highlights, because I reckon we could each go on and on for each game. So we'll see how it goes.
That is correct. So I'm going to cut you off there and go straight to Jono. Jono, what are you feeling about the weekend?
Oh, look, it's been a busy weekend. Unlike these guys.
That's fantastic, John.
Oh, okay, don't
move
worry.
on now.
No, carry on. Take it away.
We're going to try and keep it speedy regardless. John, I'm going to give you 10 seconds to just quickly finish that thought.
No, I'm keen to get stuck in. Let's do it.
Very good. Well, there were lots of very exciting games and some very interesting results as well, and we're going to go through them one by one. We're going to start at the West Coast Collingwood game, and this is one that Liam watched and is going to go through. Liam, what were your thoughts on this game?
Actually, do you want to tell everyone what we're going to do to keep us on track?
No, I think we can just do it.
Okay, fine. So, watch this game. Fascinating fantasy relevancy. First of all, the result, Collingwood win in a nail-biter. It was a game, though, that was dominated by West Coast, and Collingwood's transition ball movement is something to be concerned about. Also, very much worthwhile noting that a lot of the best defenders for Collingwood were not playing. So, Geordie Allen and Lauren Butler, both stalwarts in that backline, did not play. And then Kalinda Howarth, who has previously been a forward but has apparently been training in defence, will be also missed this game. Now, big fantasy takeaways. 1, Ruby Slisher looked as good as 2023 Bonnie Toogood in this game. I tweeted about it at watching it. She had just an insane second half. She managed to score in that second half 78 points, 15 disposals, 4 marks, 3 tackles, and 2 goals. I think that there is a real world that priced at 67, she is potentially 20 points of value, which sounds insane, but I must say that is how good she looked. Next thing to talk about, though, defensive rookies. Violet Patterson, Charlotte Brewer, Maisie Nankervis all played for Collingwood. Put up decent scores. Nankervis unfortunately injured herself in the fourth quarter. Knee hyperextension. Haven't heard anything yet about how serious, but that is not a good sign. Violet Patterson had 12 disposals, 5 marks, 5 tackles for 65 points. But most importantly, Charlotte Brewer, who is 200k, had 20 disposals, 2 marks and 6 tackles, playing off a half forward / wing. And that is 74 points, which most importantly, she's an injury replacement player, but had an 88 average in the VFLW in 2024 at Casey Demons, and then she's been playing at Collingwood this past season for an average of 55. Has been gone from the Collingwood VFLW team to the AFLW team. I thought she looked excellent. Certainly firms as a very helpful defender rookie, something we have been sorely lacking. However, none of these are the most relevant rookie from this game. That goes to Zoe Wakfa at 280k, had us 90, which, doing some maths across the weekend, is the highest score from anyone priced at 300k or below. So in the true rookie price bracket. Now, elite game, must be worth noting that neither of Charlie Thomas or Emma Swanson were playing in defence. We'll talk about particularly the former in a minute. But that does take away 2 of the key ball movers and distributors and interceptors in that back 50. Wakfa absolutely killed it. Most importantly, though, she did have on 22 possessions, 15 of them or 15 intercepts. That does speak to the role that she was playing, and also what I said earlier about Collingwood's ball movement and transition being pretty speculative. I think, though, that she is another player that has firmed probably over and above those Collingwood options because of the potential players to come in for the Pies as a pick either on your bench or at D6. I'd prefer on the bench, but we'll talk about some of the other D6 options later. Now, talking about more rookies. Misha Barwin had good TOG, 13 disposals. She's a 200k mid-forward, which is very helpful if you're looking for a utility flexibility spot. Imogen Trengove had been someone we talked about as an option, but they only played 39% time on ground, barely scored anything, only 4 disposals. Keely Skepper and Ella Slocum, both who are from West Coast at below 350k, scored well. I'd say the role was better for Slocum, and Skepper had some hamstring awareness, and that is a bit alarming. Bad days for the Pies mid-prices. Centra and Davey both were sub 50% time on ground. And although Metia Bree didn't score very well, she had 80% time on ground. She did not go anywhere near the midfield, even though Britt Bonici was out injured. But the final thing I need to talk about, and probably the most important player, Charlie Thomas and Lucille Cronin. Oh my goodness.
Lucille
Cronin. Kaylee Cronin I have to talk about later. Both played almost full-time inside midfielders and looked great. Now, the more important one is Thomas, who scored an 89, which gives her near 24 points of value for this season. And I do think that makes her a fantastic option for D2 or D3. But for Lucy Cronin, only scored a 71. I would say she was the best ball user in that Collingwood midfield, and by some margin. So I am fascinated about picking both of them.
Very nice, Liam. We have been going with an alarm to make sure people go nice and quickly here, but now it is time to ask a few questions amongst the team to make sure we are covering everything. Jono, do you have any extra thoughts?
I do. You ask about Thomas and Cronin. Will that happen during the season? I want to start with Thomas. West Coast were missing Lucia Painter, and they were also missing Bella Roberts, I believe. No, not
Bella Lewis.
Bella Lewis, yes.
Bella Lewis.
Are you expecting that role to hold once she gets back?
I'm expecting there to be some midfield time, yes. I don't think it's going to be the full game, which is what we saw on the weekend. I also think that the first player in that midfield group to go out will be Emma Swanson.
My question for you is, Lucy Cronin in the midfield is an interesting one, especially given we have some very highly owned midfield, lower-priced players for Collingwood, such as Bree Davey, Ash Centra, Matea Breed. Is Lucy Cronin going to stay in there, and what's going on with the midfield group in general at the Pies?
I think that with the defenders that the Pies had out, the chances that Lucy Cronin stays in there go up. And in general, though, I do like defenders who have spent pre-season training in the midfield, even when they do transition back to defence. I think it gives them some more confidence to be a ball user, key ball movement operator out of that back line, because at the moment it's Tiny White and no one else.
Fair enough. Jono?
You also said it was a bad day to be a mid-price pie, basically because Centra and Davey played less than 50% time on ground. But Bree Davey also put up a 57, and Ash Centra wasn't far behind with a 43. You know, you double those numbers to get a full game, you're looking at pretty good scores. Are we actually worried about that at all?
Rolls bad. Yeah, rolls were dreadful. Neither of them. So Centra sat in the goal square. Davey only had a little bit of time rolling up as a half forward into stoppage and then a few CBAs. I like both of them very little after this game. I think that they will get good, but I don't like them right now.
If that's a not fantasy relevant scoring position and they've still got pretty good scores, and it is a pracky game where we don't expect it to be a total lock for the season, you're still hard no?
It's very, it's bad. I don't know if I'm fully locking them out, but it's not
underline
good.
Bad.
Real bad.
Noted bad. We are going to move on from that game because we, as we have said many times, have a lot to get through. And the next game is a fascinating one with Jono's Hawks and the Sydney Swans. Jono, what were your thoughts on this game?
Well, this was a game that I was very excited about, being at the SCG, good conditions, and then I saw the teams named, and this is a game that after that point, it's not that I lost interest. It was more just that I don't trust a lot of the roles that we saw. There were so many big name players missing in this one. So starting with Sydney, there was no Montana Ham, no Laura Gardner, no Tanya Kennedy, basically their whole midfield. And then Zippy Fish wasn't playing, Jazz Grierson wasn't playing, Lulu Puller wasn't playing. All of these players, big minutes last year. And then for the Hawks, Jazz Fleming and Laura Stone were missing from the midfield. Najwa Allen from the defence, along with Tamara Smith. And then Mackenzie Eardley, we're not sure where she's going to play, but I'd be surprised if she's not somewhere. So a lot of big names missing. Despite that, it did end up as a pretty great clash. I think the game was quite entertaining to watch. The Hawks managed to come away with the win by 15 points, mainly due to their midfield dominance. Emily Bates and Eliza West were just all over the Swans. But it does mean we do need to treat a lot of these roles that we saw with caution. So we saw Chloe Malloy, for example, with full-time midfield minutes. I really don't see that happening once the whole midfield returns. Caitlin Ashmore also spent most of the game in the midfield for the Hawks and actually did a great job, kicked a couple goals, was really impressive. But once Fleming and Stone get back, I'm not sure that's going to hold. Where does she end up? Big question. So I'm going to try and focus most of these takeaways on what roles I do see actually happening. And the first one, probably the biggest surprise for me, was Hayley McLaughlin. So last season, she really struggled to find her feet in the team. But in this game, she had a great role on the wing, had the 69 fantasy points from just 55% time on ground. Looked really, really excellent. So I'm really hoping that she manages to hold on to that spot this year and break out into a bit more of a role. Pretty cheap forward at 425,000. The only thing is if Ashmore is pushed out of that midfield, does McLaughlin have to make way? That's going to be the tricky part there. The other place I'm a little bit worried about Ashmore ending up is off half-back, because the Hawks have been trying a lot of players back there sort of in a distributor role following the departure of Tilly Lucas-Rod. Laura Elliott took the majority of the kickouts. She's pretty cheap at 341k. And I thought she looked pretty good. Casey Sheriff, Grace Barber, and Lavinia Cox were the others, all fairly cheap players that I think are going to get a lot of time, particularly early in the season, seeing if they can pull it off. I really like Grace Barber's willingness to run and carry. She only played half the game because there was an injury concern early, but I think she's one long-term that I like for the Hawks. I'm just not sure if any of them are going to score enough. They'll probably be sharing too much, so I wouldn't do that. Jackie Dupai could be a sneaky option up forward. I think getting a lot more exposure up the head of the ball than she did in Gold Coast in recent seasons. And with McDonough attracting the best defender, she looked very comfortable out there. Ended up with the 59 fantasy points from 2 goals, 2 behinds. Had a great game. Also playing as a backup ruck, so opportunities to get up the ground. For the Swans, Ali Morfitt was really impressive. The only limitation she has is time on ground, because she puts up very good points per minute. Dominated hit-outs against Lucy Wales, also having 3 clearances and 16 disposals. I think it really depends. Caitlin Reid's played as backup rucks in recent seasons, but this is a new coach. We don't know. I don't think that she was particularly strong on the day, so I'm not sure what O'Riordan is going to do there. And lastly, if you were considering Sophia Hurley, she was their best player on the day, 8 tackles, 16 touches, and was basically rested in the last quarter. She and Malloy were kind of thrown out in that last quarter so they could give other players a bit of a chance. So I thought she was fantastic, and I wouldn't hesitate to pick her if you wanted to take her on.
Very nice summary there, Jono. And some interesting things to come. Liam, what do you have to say about that?
Just on the ruck situation, I noticed a few people online, and then just in the highlights that I watched, Maddie Quinn taking it pick 18 in the 2025 draft, scored all right on my view, only at 39, but she is just above basement priced. Is that the other player that's going to bring down Morfitt?
I think there's a lot of teams who sort of run a different ruck when they're inside forward 50 and have them, have the ruck resting behind trying to take intercept marks. That was the role that I saw from Quinn. And I do think she played it pretty well. The question is, was she impacting enough forward otherwise? Because I think it was mainly in those stoppages she was collecting the ball. I'm not quite sure I'd trust that would take that many points off of Morfitt.
Speaking of trust, if you had to pick one of the litany of defensive options that you trust right now, who would it be for Hawthorn, that is? Because in my view, it looked like their ball movement was less than spectacular.
Well, yeah, I think particularly in the first 3 quarters, the ball just kind of lived front of front half for the Hawks. So I think a lot of the time when the ball was getting back there, you'd sort of see someone just charging through, kicking long. There wasn't a lot of switches. I think really the ball was moving pretty quick off half-back. And I think the Hawks are also going to try and tinker with that a little bit going forward against, when the ball's coming a little more regularly. I'd probably go with Laura Elliott just because I think she's probably the most experienced back there, and taking kickouts is a pretty easy add-on for her. So I think that's probably where I'd go. And after that, I'd probably go Casey Sheriff, just given the experience and the fact that her long kicking is probably the only close one-for-one replacement we have with Eileen Gilroy and her ability to kick long last few seasons.
Very nice. We're going to move on to the next game, and we've got another Liam game here because he got to see the wonderful Bombers playing against a team that goes all right in the North Melbourne Tasmanian Kangaroos. Bit of a one-sided contest, this one. Liam, what were your takeaways here?
Ooh, okay, so first off, probably the main takeaway is who wasn't playing. It was Jasmine Garner out, Emma Carney out, Jenna Bruton out, Daria Bannister out, Brooke Brown, Maggie Johnson, Sophie van der Heuvel, and then Maddie Gay also out. So the main thing to take away from this game is outside of Ash Riddell, most of the relevant players weren't playing, which was certainly a frustrating one for those who had decided that they would go across to Avalon Airport Oval in Werribee, which certainly is a fascinating place for football. Probably the first one to take away is Kim Rennie not managing to make it through the game, only scores 3 because of an injury. It does bring into relevancy Emma King and then also Madison Torpy, who is a very cheap ruck. Another thing to note is probably not worthwhile trusting too much the scores from Ailey Sheeran and Mia King, 87 and 86, boosted by the absence of Jazz Garner. In terms of the rookies that I wanted to speak about from this game, I'd say there were 2. It was Maggie Johnston, who didn't play, which was a surprise. We heard a lot of positive things when we talked to George G. I expected her to play. She was not playing. And the one rookie that I really think showed something was Nalu Brothwell, forward, 200k, 51 points. I thought she looked great overhead, looked surprisingly athletic, particularly given where the Bombers took her in the draft, which was in the 50s. It's a question of trusting what she might look like during the season. But I think a 51 against North Melbourne is certainly a positive sign. I just don't know if the role is necessarily going to be one that's spectacular. And also worthwhile noting that Grace Bellany, 50% time on ground for only 16 points. I really think she is being managed coming back from an injury last year. In terms of the Bombers that I thought that passed the eye test, Maddie Prespakis, talked about her in the Essendon episode as coming back fitter and better than ever at 96, which is her previous highest average. She's on the cards again this year. She immediately put that up with a 97 on 87% time on ground. Now, there's the discount of no Garner being there, so the midfield's a little easier, but it is also still North Melbourne team that is clearly dominant, and they were able to score a lot of points. But I do think that there's a case to be made for picking Maddie Prespakis. She could put herself back into that near uber premium level. And then finally, I think you saw what you wanted from Bonnie Toogood. She still has that high half forward role. I don't think she's necessarily going to go back into the midfield this year, but scoring an 80, I don't think you saw anything to move her out of your side if you were thinking she was going to go back from that 73, which is a little depressed because of her inaccurate kicking last year, and you were going to see her back above 80 again this season.
Fantastic stuff. I do have one question for you, which was Amy Gaylor. We know that she is thrown around all over the place, scored a 70, which is pretty solid. Is the role there for her to be sort of that mid-priced option?
I don't think anything you will see from Amy Gaylor will convince, particularly in a preseason game, could convince me to pick her, because the issue she has is she's too flexible. She's a great footballer. I don't trust that she's going to get put in high-scoring positions. Unfortunately, I think she could play the Maddie Gay role if she was given it, but the Maddie Gay is still on the team, and so she plays a midfield role. She's very good with her hands. She handballs a lot. I just don't think it's worthwhile picking her.
Fair enough. And one other player that we should probably note is Ash Riddell's just scored 120, did what they do. Is that putting Ash Riddell as a lock for anyone? Mel, what do you reckon?
I think that's pretty much what we want to see from her in terms of her average. Although with the absence of some of the other midfielders. Yeah, I mean, it kind of makes sense. I would hope that it gets a little bit higher when she's got her partner Jazz Garner back, but we'll see.
A little bit higher from 120.
Yeah, I expect more, I do have a question about Vicky Wall, putting up an 85, priced at 48, including a goal, 20 disposals. That looked very impressive. Any thoughts on whether that's a lock?
I don't know if it's a lock, but I thought she looked great. But I feel like it's a bit of an Essendon thing, to be perfectly honest with you. We are not a very good football side, and we really lack anyone to go with Vicky Wall. We don't, and I'd say that most teams lack someone to go with it, but, with the extra space afforded in a preseason game, I'd be treating it with a degree of circumspect. But if we do see it early in this season with the price that she's at, if she's going to leap back up or leap again into the 60s or 70s, she might be worthwhile. Probably also worthwhile noting, I've got my eye on Alice O'Loughlin after she did look a little bit better in this game. She's been a 70 before. My question is, is the 70 she's averaged 2 years ago the outlier, or is it the norm that she's going to revert to this year? Off the preseason game, it's definitely possible. I think we have enough forward options, but another name I'm keeping tabs on.
Nice.
Very interesting stuff. We're going to keep the breakneck pace going. And I tell you what, this game is one that I reckon Jono could talk about for about an hour if we gave him the time, because he has not stopped talking about it all weekend. We're talking Port Adelaide versus Melbourne. And Jono, look, I feel bad giving you just the 4 or 5 minutes that we're getting for this episode, but try and give us as succinct a summary as you can.
Yeah, look, if enough people request it, I will do an hour-long episode on this. I could talk about Port Adelaide all day. This to me was the game of the weekend. Port Adelaide and Melbourne was in perfect conditions. It was pretty hotly contested. They were mostly full teams. Melbourne led most of the way on their way to a 5-point win, but geez, I think that the key thing we've got to talk about here is Port Adelaide's game style. It's changed exactly how you would want it to. It's incredibly fantasy friendly. They were hitting deliberate short kicks. They were switching the ball. They were hitting their 45-degree kicks into the corridor. They were giving 1-2 handballs. They took 78 marks in this game, right? And I want to be clear, that's equal most across the weekend, tied with the Gold Coast. It was 28 marks more than the average team did this weekend, and nearly double their average number of marks last season. And I appreciate that the preseason has a little bit of a buffer on how many marks because teams are taking it a bit easy. But, geez, it really, really felt like this is a very fantasy-friendly style and something I'm really excited to see this season. I think you could argue there's a bump coming for most Port Adelaide players. Abby Dowrick, Ash Woodland, Ella Heads. These are all people I've looked at locking into my team post that game. But just to pull out, I suppose, the most relevant name that I'm excited for, it's Lauren Young. Absolutely fantastic. Playing as a high half forward, no longer that deep forward we saw end of last season. She was essentially their exit kick whenever they left D50 or were trying to move it, forward of centre. And geez, she was taking contested marks, uncontested marks. She was everywhere in this game. So ended up with the 87 fantasy points. I think she's going to be an easy lock at 389,000K. I think that's a very cheap player to have. And then another player that we need to talk about is Matilda Schultz, because she dominated this game. She was coming up against Jacinta Hose, who, is coming back off multiple ACLs, is definitely, I think a very good player, but someone who's kind of growing back into the game. But Schultz really took it to town. She ended up with 129 fantasy points, 24 disposals, 35 hit-outs. And it was only the one tackle I think that actually recorded, but geez, she absolutely ragdolled it. It was brutal. I think Schultz to me is another who's going to go very, very big this year. She also did that off, I think it was sometime in the 70% time on ground. Like she was cruising to get to that number. Melbourne, on the other hand, they run a lot of familiar faces through a lot of their team, as you'd expect. Liv Purcell played full-time midfield, as did Tyler Hanks. Both were very, very good. But I think there's two players in particular that we need to pull out and discuss. So Mia Austin played as one of the lead-up targets for the Ds, and there was no Taylor Harris in this game, who's currently got a calf injury. But I thought Mia Austin was fantastic. She had a goal, took 3 marks, 9 touches, but it was really the fact that she was also pinch hitting through the ruck. She was supporting Jacinta Hose through there. She had the 7 hit-outs, but 11 tackles, which were mostly around stoppage. So I was really, really impressed with her. I think at 362,000 is another one for us to consider in our teams. particularly with Lauren Pearce set to miss a lot of the early season with a knee injury. At the other end of the ground, Molly O'Hare was surprisingly the main distributor. So we know that Maeve Chaplin's going to miss a lot of the next few weeks. I think we'd been looking at players like Geordie Allen coming off halfback. Lauren Clifton was one they picked up recently, who were both there and I thought did all right in their roles. But Molly O'Hare to me was the main one. She was taking marks. Her height is fantastic. So she was intercepting the ball quite a lot as well. But she had the 22 disposals and 8 intercept possessions. So I thought it was a really fantastic game, and I think that is easily replicable against a lot of the top competition in the AFLW.
Okay.
Very nice.
So I also watched this game, not just Jono, and I thought it was fascinating too. I'd say I loved so much of Port Adelaide's ball movement once it exited D50. They're still, a lot of their defenders are still in old mode, which is go out as quick and as fast as they can. That's why Lauren Young had a great game, because she was an outlet kick so much, almost too much, I would actually say. And it's why I'm a little bit concerned about Ella Heads for now, because I think it was a very wide open, very fast game.
Yeah. In the first quarter, they did not switch very often. I'm 100% with you. I think as the game went on and legs tired, they did start using the switch kick a little more. But Ella Heads for sure I think she had so many intercept possessions. I think she had at least 11 or 12. So the majority of her possessions were coming that way, for sure.
Yeah, it's one that I'm like iffy on. The score's great. Dig a little deeper and it starts to get a little bit more questionable. On Molly O'Hare, this is a tough one for me because high draft pick, drafted mainly for her tackling and inside midfield work, was often their main distributor. I feel like Paxi Paxman turn back the clock for the however manyth time. Molly O'Hare's problem is that her kicking is horrendous.
Oh, I think that's harsh. I think she was taking on some challenging kicks, which is a different question.
I think that her kicking is really bad, and I don't think that Melbourne will want her to be taking most of their kicks. That is just my view, and I've been wrong in the past, and I've also had some of these where I maintain it, and it turns out to be part of the reason why they moved. Molly O'Hare scored really well. She's quite cheap, and so I'll probably still consider her. But I don't know if Melbourne are going to be successful. They want to have her as their main distributor off halfback.
I'm just going to throw one last question from this game because there's so much we could be talking about. So you'll have to wait for Jono's 1 hour episode. Abby Darrick or Ash Woodland, who would you go first, Jono?
Oh, hardest decision of my weekend for sure. I'm leaning towards Abby Darrick just because I think she's got so much talent. And I think Ash Woodland generally tries to push ahead of the ball, and that can be, great in some games and lead her to struggle in others. I think Darrick's going to be far more consistent, and that's probably why I lean that way. But geez, I think they're both in with a lot of value this season.
I thought Woodland looked incredible. She hit up for so many short marks. Like I genuinely it looks like Jazz Garner.
Yeah. I've been trying to figure out how to get them both in my side this weekend. It's been tricky.
She looked incredible and had not been on my radar really. And that's just down to her being a forward last year.
Fascinating stuff. We'll now move over to another game which was incredibly fascinating from a fantasy perspective. Mel, this was the game you watched, Gold Coast versus Carlton. Possibly not quite the same quality as the other game, but still some really fascinating things happening in this one.
Yeah, I was expecting it to be a lot more one-sided than it was, especially, Carlton coming up against a very young and lowly ranked Gold Coast Suns from last season. But even though Carlton were in the lead for most of the game, the Suns really owned it on the stats. They looked fast. They looked like they were in control. They had 30 more disposals than Carlton, higher efficiency, 40 plus uncontested possessions. They were really nailing all the stats. The key things to come out of this game, I think, was the Gold Coast rookies. So notable absences from the Suns were Charlie Rowbottom, Jamie Stanton, Katie Lynch and Maddie Brown-Catazano. So kind of key names on each line. But for Carlton, really only Maddie Gearin, who's injured, and Yasmin Durza missing. So Carlton pretty much brought their full team. So key takeaways, Havana Harris, fantastic. Forward priced at 60.3, she put up 105 fantasy points. We knew she was going to be big this preseason and this season, and she absolutely did it. She was clearly their forward target, but it kind of felt like there was a little bit too much reliance on her at times. But I guess, we didn't have Jamie Stanton in the game. But yeah, with the absence of Jack Depay, as she's no longer in the side, Stanton not playing and Rowbottom out, she was really like all over the ground. She was very heavily relied upon and she looked fantastic. So I think that given her price, that's even more of a great reason to pick her, even though she was already a high choice. In terms of the other rookies, so Lily Quigley takes it for Gold Coast. She was so impressive on the wing with her speed. She just had such a fantastic ability to make space. She looked like she had been playing for a lot longer than she had. She got 17 disposals. At one stage, she got such a strong run in space that she made 4 bounces, which was very impressive to see, and 2 goals for an impressive 82 fantasy points. So it was up against her versus kind of some of the other rookies. So she was the standout to me. Sunny Lappin did look like she held a consistent CBA role. She was in there for most of it. So also a cheap midfield rookie coming out with 62 fantasy points off 18 disposals. But the main one that we've been talking about in this preseason, I'd say, was Ava Usher, and she definitely looked a lot quieter than expected. Seems like she was rotated a bit forward more so, and not really that CBA lock role. Definitely went to Sunny over her. So that kind of informs the stack rank of the rookies I'll be putting in my side, in the midfield at least. Then we've got Georgia Davis in the ruck, and she looked fantastic. She picked up 86 fantasy points. She was not playing the ruck the whole time, for sure. She was definitely in the back line, used as a trusty pair of hands there. But fantastic marking ability. 7 marks she took in that game. And it really freed up the ruck role for Paige Price, another 200 grand Gold Coast rookie. There are so many cheap rookies at Gold Coast that just looked fantastic in this game. So Paige Price, she was obviously up against very tough competition with Carlton's duo in Lauren Bella and Jess Good. So her tapping, ruck hit out wins, not so great. But around the ground, 12 disposals and 3 tackles, she definitely looks useful. Even if she's not the most dominant ruck, I think she really looked strong out there. So for 200k, that's a pretty good option. On to the Carlton side, though. Claudia Whitford, she was only on the ground for 47% of the time, and she put up a 49. I was not as hot on her as I would have hoped. I was really looking forward to seeing kind of some more of her, and that 49 includes a goal as well. So, I mean, great if she can continue with the goal kicking, but she looked strong in the CBAs in the back half, but she was quite absent during the first. So I don't really know what was going on there. It's not quite what I expected to see. But the standout to me from Carlton was Shifa O'Connell. She is a second-year defender coming in, and she really had what looked like a breakout performance to me. 9 intercept possessions. She tied for the lead in that game with what we know as very experienced interceptors, Harriet Cordner, Mia Gervin, for also 9. So she just looked phenomenal out there. Looks like the role was largely hers. I mean, we do know that Katie Lynch wasn't in the game, but we heard in our interview early this preseason she would be the Carlton player to watch, and it looked good.
Katie Lynch probably won't make a whole lot of difference to Shifa O'Connor, given she plays for Gold Coast, but
true.
But
Never
as
mind.
you say, very good that Aisling Reading has provided us with a great little breakout candidate there. I do want to talk quickly about this game because it is one of the few games that I did get to watch. A couple of things that I did also notice alongside what you said, Mel, was Gold Coast seemed to be doing a lot more kick marking, which is a really interesting one. And a player that I was quite keen on was Anne Hatchard, because they finally have a player that can actually take a mark and spread from a contest. And Claudia Whitford, as you said, didn't really sit in the centre bounces that much. Made a bit of an appearance in the second half, but in the first half, it was almost entirely Lily Goss, Mimi Hill, and Abby Mackay. So that does cool me a little bit on Claudia Whitford as a potential pick. We're just going to quickly get your thoughts, Liam, then we might move on to the next one.
So the one thing that really concerned me was Daisy Darcy, very low time on ground, and that chip mark game style that you were talking about, Willow, was dreadful because for some reason in Gold Coast infinite wisdom, they decided that the main pivot in that should be Clara Fitzpatrick, who had 10 plus marks, and it was just not great to watch, if I'm being perfectly honest. But we also saw fewer points from Neve McLaughlin too. That just gives me a little bit of concern about what the game style might be for Gold Coast this year. I think that is a bit of a worry for Daisy Darcy. We, fantasy community know how good she's going to be or how good she can be, but not with this coach.
It did scream to me this is a rookie testing game, and so I'm not sure how much of this will stay. So I took it as like a litmus test for the rookies that have got something to show, rather than like so many key players not really having as large a role as we would have hoped. But yeah, bit concerning.
Yeah, I was curious about McLaughlin only having 33 minutes on field, no row bottom. It's interesting because I think a lot of the rookies did really play well, but when these stars kind of take the spot we expect them to take, who stays, who kind of shifts out in their role and becomes less prominent, it's going to be an interesting mix.
Yeah, and I take that a lot more confidence out of what we saw from Carlton. One of the ones that absolutely boggled us was Brooke Boylow played 33% of the game, and the team was basically full strength, played a bit on the forward line, didn't really appear through the midfield, didn't really appear at all. So that's one that we were quite keen to watch, but unfortunately doesn't look necessarily like it's going to get a lot of time. We might leave it there for Carlton because we are going on about this one as well. So we'll move on to the Dockers versus Richmond. Mel, this was another game that you watched, and if my memory serves me correctly, you thought this was one of the most aesthetically pleasing games you've ever watched.
I thoroughly enjoyed it. So I was expecting this to be fairly contested, and it wasn't actually as contested as I would have thought, given it's Richmond and Fremantle. And unfortunately, Fremantle did not win, and it did not look great, but that's okay. So there are notable absences, like no Emma O'Driscoll. Freo were struggling in the back line, and that was one of the key takeaways based on that, I would say. But Richmond looked really good, and I don't know if it was Richmond looking good or Fremantle looking bad, but Richmond were moving really fast. I mean, Moncon and Ellie McKenzie and Sierra Greaves in the middle looked like a very dynamic trio rather. Richmond were really coming in attacking with speed, and as well, their backline was just impenetrable. Impenetrable, which was frustrating to watch. So the takeaways being Greaves. I mean, she looks like a lock for that CBA role up against Conti and McKenzie. It was interesting, though, to see Bia Pugh, a 200k mid, also getting in there a little bit. She put up a 56 points from a 30-point quarter. So wasn't in it a whole game, but that did show some promising signs. Liam?
Also, just Milsey Yasir was a name through the midfield as a CBA player in a massive shock. Did not see that happening whatsoever.
Yeah, she also looked pretty good. As well, OG friend of the pod, Gabby Seymour, looked fantastic in her forward role. She put up a 67. I mean, she was largely helped by the fact that the ball was in Richmond's forward line pretty much the whole time. But she, listed as a defender but playing in the forward, looked really good. And I can see her being a strong replacement. I didn't mention who wasn't playing. Katie Brennan wasn't playing, amongst others. But I'm not too sure how that will hold if KB is coming back, but she really put up a promising performance, I'd say. On the Fremantle side, we saw Mia Anderson in the midfield, and this is largely because Fremantle stripped themselves of their midfield. Kiara Bowers and Ash McCarthy not playing, as well as Hayley Miller, who sometimes makes an appearance. So Mia Anderson was the rookie to chop through. She put up a 69, but I'm not sure if she's going to be holding this role for long. Her kicking was a little bit wonky. I think she had quite a few turnovers overall. Wasn't quite the calibre that they're used to in the midfield. We also saw quite a few people running through there, so it did kind of look like a testing game. We saw Lowe, Stannard, Kaufman all kind of rotate through the CBAs. So, but, Mia Anderson looked like the rookie to try. We also saw a few ruck rotations coming from Fremantle, Bella Smith and Tanisha Kikowak making more of a role there as Mim Strom was playing forward, which was an interesting choice. Maybe this is just a rotation of the young talent. But what I saw from that was that Poppy Kelly looked really good. She looked really strong, really fast. I think that she is upping her ruck skills, and she could be one that, we see break out a little bit further this year. She is mid-priced though, so not too attractive of an option, but really one to watch there. And then I just have to say, Sarah Verrier. I mean, we love her.
That's it? That's it. Yeah, great.
Sarah Verrier. Yeah, Sarah Verrier did in fact play the game. That is a great final point.
Yeah, she looked fantastic. 13 uncontested possessions playing off halfback. She was at her best. And yes, we had no Emma O'Driscoll, but like Sarah Very when she's good is good, and she really put it all out.
71 points to Sarah Verrier. I think that is what Liam would call a lock. We will now throw it open. Jono, what are your thoughts?
Well, I have a question for Mel. Players that we've been talking about in the preseason for Richmond were Georgia Stubbs and Montana Baroldson running off half back. I saw that
Yes.
we had a 41 and a 53 for them respectively. Given they're pretty cheap, what did you think of their games? Are they worth starting?
41 and a 53, you say? I thought Georgia Stubbs got like a 37.
Got a 41.
41.
41.
I must have had a tackle added.
Yeah.
Yes, my apologies. I found Georgia Stubbs hard to keep an eye on. I think she was okay, but she didn't look like she was regularly in the role. It was like making a bit more of an appearance and rotating through. So I would say that given that she was on the ground the whole time pretty much, but didn't really have that much contact, cooling a little bit, I didn't see enough to lock that one in for myself. And Montana Baroldson, I'm not too sure. I think she looked okay, but she wasn't a standout from my eyes. Anyone else?
I think you've perfectly summarised. Georgia Stubbs, the main thing, it's impossible to see where she is. Like, I barely noticed her watching the game.
I'm so glad it wasn't just me.
I'm just like...
I was trying so hard.
Number 20, I think she's like 27. I reckon I saw her twice.
Yeah.
I'm surprised she got to 41, to be perfectly honest.
Yeah, same.
Yeah, I think with Stubbs, the main takeaway there is 41 isn't huge, but for a 200k defensive rookie, we don't have a whole lot of those. So if she plays, it's probably one of the few bottom price rookies that we're actually going to get. So that may actually be enough. We may move on now to the Adelaide Crows versus Liam's favourite ever team, St Kilda. And I mean, there's one big thing coming from this that we're going to talk about, which was I'm pretty certain was the highest individual score of the round. But Liam, what can you tell us about Adelaide and the Saints?
Well, you're right in saying it was the highest score of the weekend, and that was Ebony Marinoff's 152, and it was a domination by her and by Crows, who after halftime put St Kilda to the sword. The defence of the Saints could not hold up to the just relentless onslaught, and the midfield with some tinkering really struggled to win many clearances. First takeaway from this game is Ebony Marinoff is a lock. I asked some questions when we did the midfielder episode about whether a new game style might make Noffy a less potent scorer. I think it's fairly clear that she's going to be a dominant scorer. And in fact, maybe she's a little bit more accurate with her kicking. The other lock and the second takeaway from this game was Tia Charlton, who had the role that we wanted to see. And I think that was enough to be able to say that we can pick her. She was spending a majority of her time in and around the ball. In terms of forwards that we were keen on picking, though, the one that I do have some concerns about is Ash Richards. She still scored okay, probably not as many points above what she's priced at. So she scored a 71, she's priced at 66. Still a little bit of value there. But the thing that I really hated to see was A, that she spent time forward in the second half of each quarter. She would have like a couple of CBAs and then move forward. And B, that she looked good doing it. I reckon she would have comfortably led the Saints for marks inside the forward half of the ground. Kicked a goal as well from a nice mark that she took whilst working as a half forward. She sat third in line for the CBAs for St Kilda. So it was T. Smith and Georgia Patrikios as 1 and 2, then Ash Richards at 3, and then an interesting combination of Charlotte Baskarin and a rookie that I'll talk about in a minute in Karis Daddario, who has kind of thrown herself into consideration as a player to pick. I think, though, the concern now is Ash Richards isn't as cheap as we would like for someone who probably splits 50-50 at the moment. Based on what we saw, forward and midfield, I'm a little bit worried about what might happen. Next takeaway is, in terms of the rookies, Chloe Bown is a lock to be in my team. The question is just now, can we pick her on field? I think that she looked excellent. She was playing predominantly as a forward, but still kicked a couple of goals and looks extremely tidy. I think that she's going to be an excellent player. The other questions we could ask of rookies is Julia Kelly was a low time on ground, just above 50%, but she was just rotating straight into the midfield, was probably fourth for CBAs for the Crows, and she has an elite scoring pedigree, averaging, I think it's like 110 in the Waffle W last season. And as I said, Karis Daddario, who was an end of first round and start of second round pick, scored a 56% time on ground, but she was up there in the CBAs. I don't know if necessarily I start her straight away, but I think if she does come up as a rookie, at just above 200k, worthwhile picking. Other things to note, Jamie Lambert is playing in half back now. She scored a 78. But I do wonder if that might impact Serene Watson if she stays there. Serene Watson still scored excellently, started relatively quietly. It might take down the ceiling. It could also improve it because it's a better kick back there. Now, final player to talk about, and someone that we got a couple of questions about, Maddie Newman with a 115. God, she looked good. Played on the wing, but honestly just covered the entirety of the ground. Looked like, Dana Finn and Eliza McNamara of 2025 and 2024, where we've had a breakout wing get to around 100 average. That's how good Maddie Newman looked. I think she's going to work excellently in space. I feel like she's going to be the next highest midfield scorer. And then another quick thing to mention just on roles, we didn't see any of Bowen in the midfield. We also didn't see any Grace Egan in the midfield. She still scored okay, but playing predominantly as a forward, which is interesting because someone like India Rashid also wasn't playing. So I feel like those two are probably not going to spend much time in the midfield early.
Fascinating stuff. And the Tia Charlton one is one that I'm very excited by. Any extra thoughts on those ones from you, Mel or Jono? Jono?
Yeah, I continue to want to ask questions about Hannah Munyard because I think she's going to be a great forward this year. I saw she scored a 73. I'm pretty positive. What were his takeaways there?
Looked solid off relatively low disposals, put on a bulk of her score in the second half when the game was being put to the sword. I think she looked great, but the role just doesn't really suit what I want to latch myself onto when I've got to try and pick a forward to break out. I think she looked good, but again, she's had two great scores in the last two games she's played. They're both against St Kilda, who I don't think have a defender who can go with her. I feel like there are more teams across the AFLW that do.
And I think there's one other player that we will talk about because we talked about her a lot in the preseason, but I think the role hasn't been great, which is Emily Fiedler.
Oh, yes, Emily Fiedler, barely any time on ground and really struggled in the ruck. I would not be picking Emily Fiedler at a slightly increased price, given that we have seen now a stack of 200 to 300k rookie ruck options.
But she was playing as the primary ruck?
When she was on the ground, all of 40%, it was Reen Karras who was first. I know.
Reen?
Install a Reen at your R1. Don't do that. I promise, don't do that.
You heard it here first. Reen Karras, your number one ruck pick. Liam special right there. We'll now move on to another team that has very little in terms of interest in the rucks, which is my Geelong Cats. Geelong versus Brisbane, another interesting game. Jono, you were across this one.
I was, and quite frankly, Willa, you can say less about the Geelong Rucks because I think we may have a bit of a tidbit for you later. But we'll get to that in a second. Geelong burst out of the blocks in this one, putting on 3 quick goals before the sleeping giant that is the Brisbane Lions woke up and they went back to just slowly grinding out a win yet again. But I thought there was a little bit of interest in this match for us, none more so than the second highest fantasy scorer of the weekend, Michaela Bowen. I've got to get that out of my system every time. She had the most disposals of any player across the weekend with 40. And in the absence of Georgie Prasparkas, she played 100% midfield time. And honestly, she was not just the best player for Geelong. I'd say she's the best player on the ground. She had 7 score involvements, 7 intercept possessions, 3 clearances, 6 inside 50s, 8 marks, 5 tackles for 148 fantasy points in the end. Her disposals, I think, created a lot of movement for the Cats. I think she was really getting them going. Sometimes she'd run them into trouble, but I think more than not, she was the one that was, driving the ball forward and getting through this very, very strong Lions defense. even with Prasparkas back in the midfield, I would have to say off the back of this sort of a preseason, I think that role is going to hold. So realistically, she's not averaging 148. But I do think there is a chance we could see 100 averaging fantasy forward.
Outrageously hot take.
Yeah. So I've currently brought her into my side. I'm pretty excited about Bowen. Of all the other Geelong defenders that I think we need to talk about, because there are plenty that we were considering this preseason, I think most of them did enough if you were already considering them. So Chantel Emerson was a bit slow to get off the mark in this game, but really warmed into it. She took plenty of kickouts and quite a few marks, so ended up on the 56 fantasy points. She was sharing those kick-in duties with Rebecca Webster, who was also excellent as the new co-captain, had the 21 touches and the 65 fantasy points. I think if you were already considering both of those, they've done absolutely nothing wrong. I would keep considering them. Evie Coucher also put her hand up as a pretty reliable bench option for us. I think she ended up with the 16 touches, so definitely one to have in your back pocket, even if the fantasy score wasn't that high. I think there are a few frees against in that one, unfortunately. But coming up to the rucks that we love, Piper Dunlop had a career best game. I actually really, really loved what Dunlop was doing from that basketball background that she has. 61 fantasy points in this one. And I think she's going to have the solo role. I doubt she'll be sharing with tipping. So I think the 4 clearances, 11 hitouts, also against a pretty strong ruck pair up between Hickey and Hartill. I'm pretty sure that that's another option we could consider on our benches. A little bit more expensive at $365,000. Now, on the Brisbane side of things, I had a couple red flags. We've talked a lot about Courtney Hodder and Charlie Mullins over this preseason, and there was not a lot of mid-clock. I think Hodder got a few. Mullins was sort of out on the wing for quite a bit of that, but I don't know. To me, it's looking like it's going to be another season, probably the third in a row, where they start a little bit slow and then build into it as the season goes on. And I've got some question marks on whether or not I would want to start them. And then another rookie's popped up in the midfield. Marlo Graham was really, really impressive with their forward pressure. I think was probably the only Brisbane line to show up in that first quarter. Ended up with the 13 touches for the match. And yeah, had some incredible defensive efforts that are probably going to get her a start in round 1.
We've seen a few midfield rookies have strong games. Has Marlo done enough for you to consider her? Because this is the first time I've really heard this name personally. How high up on your rookie mid-price rank is she?
She's not up on my rankings at the moment. She hasn't found her way into my side. I'm mainly just putting it, I feel like at this point of the season, we're going, oh my God, there's so many rookies to consider. And then we get to round 1 and there are very, very few names left on the list. So I just want to flag this in case we're coming down to, 3 or 4 200Ks. Marlo's one that I really don't mind.
Is Charlie Mullins still in your team at this point?
Oh, look, she is currently, but it's mainly because I can't decide who I want to bring in instead of her. I don't know. I feel like Mullins started strong, and it sort of felt like one of those games where once Brisbane got on top, like they were just kind of going through the motions. I feel like Mullins is a player that shows up in the tough games. So I don't know. I'm kind of happy to run with it for the moment, but I'll definitely be exploring my options over the coming days.
Fascinating stuff. We might move on from that game to the final game of the weekend, which was another interesting clash that you watched, Jono, between GWS and the Western Bulldogs.
Yeah, this was an incredibly one-sided game, I have to say. The Giants look like they might be in for another long season, sadly. The Dogs controlled the ball all game, won every quarter, ended up with a 43-point victory. Look, there were a few noticeable absences for the Giants. Georgia Garnett, Sally Goldsworthy, Eilish O'Dowd and Caitlin Sohoy were not there. Goldsworthy noticeably is probably going to miss the first half of the season, which is really going to hurt them. But yeah, look, I think the Dogs just had it under control from the get-go, and a large part of that was thanks to the efforts of Ellie Blackburn playing the mid-forward role exactly how you would want it to be done. Well, with the DPP, spent her time between the midfield and deep forward, collecting 29 touches and the 2 goals to end up with 111 fantasy points. She was also joined by a new midfield partner in Elaine Grigg, who, a bit of a tackling machine, had the 12 tackles in a new midfield role. I love her energy. It's infectious, and I think we're hopefully going to see a lot more of it this year because I absolutely loved it. The only question mark I have on this is that they were playing against the Giants, and the Giants were very fumbly. So you end up with more tackles as a result of that. Up forward for the Dogs, I thought Emma McDonald had a fantastic second year, pre-season. And it looks like she's taking another big step. Very, very clean, had the 8 marks. And I think inaccuracy was the only thing that stopped her from having a very, very big day with the 1 goal, 4 behinds, but did end with the 83 fantasy points. I think with a key forward, you kind of want a good run. And they start the season with Gold Coast and Richmond, which sounds positive, but then you run into North Melbourne, you run into Hawthorn. I'm not sure if the first 2 games alone is enough to justify the pick, but she did look fantastic. So I'll just wanted to flag that one. The ruck battle was really, really interesting. So Alice Edmonds for the Bulldogs dominated the first half, was taking big intercept marks, had the 55 points in the first half, and then I think started just resting around the ground, leaving some of the other dogs to take a run through the ruck. But on the other side of things, it's not as if the Giants were outmatched. So Yasmin Janšek was probably, I think, the best of the rucks that we got to see. And while she was beaten in the hitouts, I think it was her marks around the ground that I was really impressed with. Had a few clearances as well. And, for a first-year player, really managed to hold her own. Maisie Evans was another that had some good opportunities and was probably better in the hit-out department. So they've got so many options between Janšek, Evans, Fleur Davies we've seen before. Eilish O'Dowd didn't play this game. I really don't know who is going to end up with that role, but that's just one to watch because the majority of them are going to be 200K. So very, very cheap options for sure. And we love an R2 of the Giants. Elise Parker was, I would say, the best, or one of the best players for the Giants on the day. She and Beck Beeson ended up managing to turn around the clearance count. They actually won it despite getting absolutely thumped on the scoreboard. And that was in no doubt due to Parker's 22 disposals, ended up with the 91 fantasy points. I think all we're looking for is a 90-point average. So it's very comforting to see she can get it done in a big loss. And she is one that I'm sticking with in my side. The major flag of the weekend, I think, came from Tilly Lucas-Rod. Unfortunately, they were not where you would expect them to be, instead rolling around the half-forward line. So, at times they would impact, they'd push up to stoppage when it was there, but the ball really just lived at the other end of the ground. So I really doubt that this role is going to last all season. If they keep struggling to get it at a defensive 50, maybe they'll push to the back line. But I'm probably looking at Lucas-Rod more as someone, in the back half of the season after they've dropped a bit of cash, not as someone to start with.
Yeah, that Lucas-Rod one was it was a curveball, and the irony was they were actually named in that forward line when the teams were selected, and we were just kind of like, oh yeah, that's probably just team sheet shenanigans, as we know have often happened in AFLW. But yeah, I just don't understand getting one of the best halfback distributors into your side as a big name recruit and then playing them in the role where they can impact the least.
If Tilly Lucas-Rod was forward, Tani Evans put up a 28. Where were they playing? Were they
forward?
Also forward.
Forward as well, and the ball just wasn't there?
Correct.
Just wasn't there. Yeah.
Oh.
Ball really just lived forward for the Dogs.
And even then, it's not like GWS's defenders scored that many points either. Like, they could not take marks to really take control of this game.
Yeah, I think it was
I think their most
300
marks
to
was
210 disposals. Like, it was nearly 50% more.
Oh, jeez.
Yeah. I mean, you had Cambridge McCormack scoring just 41. Emily Pease was the most with 55, and I'm guessing that was a lot due to the kickouts. It doesn't paint a great picture for the Giants and their fantasy prospects beyond Elise Parker at this stage, I would say.
I think the one player I neglected to mention would be Kiera Yerbury, who I thought had some good moments. I think they were sold into a lot of trouble. A lot of hospital handballs came their way. But generally, I thought they played a pretty decent role. The question is whether Caitlin Sirhoy coming back, is probably the big flag there.
And I think that being an out-in-space player is such a, double-edged sword for GWS. They do like to move the ball quickly and are constantly trying to race the ball onto the wing, which is where Yerbury was, but also some of their ball movement is just dreadful. And so the ball will just not get there a lot of the time. So, yeah, I also thought Yerbury was okay. I don't think I can start her. I question if I can actually have her in my team. Say starter on field, sorry. I just don't know if I can even pick her. Like I thought JWS looked dreadful.
Yeah.
Like so bad.
I'd say for the price that Yeobury is, I think you'd probably be better looking at maybe one of the Gold Coast rookies. I think there's probably safer picks around Yeobury's price. I think we might leave it there for that game and all the games. So much to digest. There's so much there. I think I might just end with going through each of you and saying, based on what we've seen this weekend, who is one player that you've dropped from your team and who is one player that you've brought in? I'll start with you, Mel.
Lock Odnoffy as opposed to Gardner, just because she's going unsighted. So for my expensive mid. So it would be Noffy definitely in. And the drop would probably be Ash Richards.
Nice. Go over to Liam now. Liam specifically, who have you changed in your team?
I have dropped Daisy Darcy and I have picked Charlie Thomas and Lucille Cronin.
Interesting. Jono, how about you?
Well, I ended up dropping Mizuki Brothwell based on the fact that they did not really get a look in. And I think the player that I'm most excited to have picked up is Abby Dowrick.
Ooh.
Yes. Nice.
Very nice. I think for me, I'm devastated to say that I have dropped Charlie Mullins. I'm sorry. But the player that I picked up is a player who is quickly becoming one of my other favorites, which is Havana Harris. I loved what I saw from Havana Harris. I think that they're going to use her all the time. And to me, I think a 60-point price point is well unders for Havana Harris. Such is her talent. But there are so many different players that we will be looking at based on these preseason games. And in order to get all of that information, we will be releasing articles for you, depending on whether we can fit it all in. For you to read, we'll give you all of the information about who we think are good picks and potentially not so great picks based on what we saw over the weekend. Overall, I think it's been a very, very fascinating weekend, and hopefully you have gotten some interesting tips for your fantasy team. We might leave it there. It's been an absolute bumper episode, but hopefully you have enjoyed it. I've been your host, Willow. I've had the whole crew here, and we will see you next time for some more interesting stuff. And we're getting very, very close to the season now. We'll have our Rucks episode coming soon as well. So follow us on the socials and keep an eye out for more articles and heaps more fantasy content in the coming days/weeks.
And make sure you check on our Twitter account. You'll have the Free Kick official league code. That'll start going in all of the show notes as well. And then if you are playing leagues, you can now add any one of the four of us as an additional member to make up the numbers. Again, it's something we'll talk about in later episodes. I had meant to put in the run sheet earlier. It's coming in now because I forgot to do it.
So if you want to feel good in your league, you can add Willow or myself.
Yep, you can add Mel or I if you want someone that just needs to play in the league and may not do so well. But if you really want to challenge, Jono and Liam are your people. But hopefully you enjoy playing with the four of us. You'll get to see our faces on our team pictures as well, replacing our funny images from previously, which is very sad. Hope you enjoyed that and hope you enjoy playing with us as well. We will catch you next time. Good luck, everyone, and hopefully these preseason games have given you a lot of information. We'll catch you next time. See you later.
Thanks,
See ya.
everyone.
Bye.